Today we're talking about why your muscles break down, fatigue, and burn out. We're going to dive into how your brain is actually part of the problem that's causing this burnout and fatigue. And we're going to give you some simple solutions on how you can fix that. And the person that's going to help me talk about this topic today is my good friend and our special guest today, Eric Wilson. This guy is a doctor of physical therapy. He's a professional cyclist. He's been a trainer for professional motocross and supercross racers. He's been a trainer for X-Game athletes. He's a certified strength and conditioning coach. This guy's a savage, and he's going to help you learn a lot about why your muscles break down and how you can fix it. So let's go ahead and jump in. My name's Sean Walker. You're watching Cell Sauce TV. Let's get to it.
We talked about muscles for older people, like your whole body kind of breaking down. So let's just discuss why, two things really, like why do muscles break down? Both in younger, because they do, right? We go and exercise, whether you're 15 or 55, like the process is happening. People ask me all the time, like, why are my muscles breaking down? Why do I fatigue out type deal? And how do I fix this?
Yeah, so they fatigue out because of a normal process. You build up lactic acid and the muscle fibers essentially tear. As the muscle fibers tear, they have to repair. That process is a set process. Everybody's a little bit different on how fast they repair. An example of tearing would be you work out on a Monday and you have soreness for Tuesday and Wednesday. That was a good amount of tearing of the muscle tissue, and you had some inflammation there. And that amount of time may be needed for it to come back again in terms of fully repairing. And that's an example of a normal kind of breakdown process. As you get better and more trained, that window may shorten, where you may just be sore for that afternoon, or you may not get sore. And then that's when we increase the activity training load, so we can keep trying to create a level of tearing and breaking down. But then we also want to build back up, and that's where the recovery comes in. And the amino acids we talked about, the branched chain amino acids and the whey proteins and those kinds of things after high intensity activity are a good way to ensure you're keeping your muscle mass and starting that protein synthesis again to build back up.
Gotcha. So you talked about, so the more we train, like we tear them and then they rebuild. So what, we have lactic acid buildup. Is that strictly because our muscles, like we hit a breaking point in the muscle, or is it a lack of oxygen to those muscles? Like really what causes that lactic acid?
So it's oxygen in, oxygen, actually CO2 out. So as you bring oxygen in, you have to be able to get rid of it. And that body has piping in it. It's only so big and it can't get that out. So as soon as that inflow is too much, and then there's not enough oxygen to come in to get it out, you can't get it out anymore, and you start building up in the muscle. Okay. And that's basically the process of lactic acid. And it's a sign for us to dial down the intensity a little bit, those kinds of things. Let's just know we're challenging our system, our cardiovascular system, and our muscular system.
So then if we're talking like that, then that has a lot to do with blood flow as well. Then like the more you get like a higher blood flow, like you can get that CO2 out, oxygen in, and you can kind of replenish your muscles faster.
Yes, that's where a lot of the supplements come in, where you're doing like vasodilation.
Okay.
Beet juice is very popular. Nitric oxide helps make the blood vessels large and make them larger, so you can bring more blood flow in. So the more you can bring out, the more you can get out, basically. And that's where some of those supplements come in and help with performance, and can help with VO2 max and that whole process.
That makes VO2 max increase as well. Like if you can increase your blood flow, like, and that's one I spoke with you about, when we were formulating some of the stuff at Cell Sauce. We actually came up with two different ones called B-Chargin, which is a vasodilator. Like it has a lot of the stuff you just mentioned in it, but to increase that, and there's another one that we focused on was called Energy Sauce, the same deal. Like how could we, and that was one of our focuses, right? Like, my story, you are familiar with my story, but if you're watching, you may not be. Like one of the big reasons I started this company is because I broke my back in 2016. And it happened because like for a split second, I lost focus. Did I lose focus because I was a little bit tired? Was I a little bit fatigued? Sure. Right. I'm racing a motocross bike, but a small lapse in judgment and a little loss of focus resulted in like near death. Right. And I was paralyzed for a while.
Yeah.
You know, so one of the reasons I did this company is because I look at some of the companies that have the biggest influence over the motocross industry and the athletic industry, and they're not putting out good products. I mean, let's face it, right? They put out killer
Yeah, not
videos.
necessarily putting out supplements for you. Yeah.
Yeah, but they don't help. And so I look at it like, okay, if I hadn't lost focus and if I was better fitness and was I better like mentally prepared, would I have had that same accident? I don't know. But I don't want other people to go through that same thing. So it's like, what can we do to give them a better chance at not having that? So, you know, when we did the research, we were like, how can we increase blood flow? How can we increase your oxygen intake? Because, dude, we know how athletes are, right? We push it and push it and push it until the breaking point, and sometimes we push it a little too far. I mean,
Exactly.
we see it every weekend at the races, right? Like we push it a little too hard and we're like, oops, I hit the wall.
And you wouldn't know what that is until you push it, right?
Exactly.
Where that line is. So
Until you make a mistake, and you just hope the mistake is not, you know, life threatening, for example. Okay, so that's how they break down. And you're big into, like, of course, anyone, like, you know, we got to have your essential amino acids. You got to have your proteins to help that protein synthesis, your muscles rebuild as fast as possible.
particularly after you train hard, definitely.
Right. You know, and then from a training standpoint, if you're not getting sore the next day, you step it up a little bit.
Yeah, if that's your goal, absolutely. It depends on season as well. If it's in season and we don't want to create soreness, we're going to probably operate at a sub threshold just to not create too much soreness, but keep working on form. If it's out of season and we're trying to build towards something, then we might challenge that system repeatedly
Okay.
and try to use that muscle soreness as a guide. Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Any muscle soreness could turn into a muscle strain. That's what I see in the clinic regularly when we push that too hard. So I try to err on maximizing that process, but also on the lighter side of things and not overdoing it. So we're not pushing people into overtraining. Like you said, if you're overtraining and you're tired and you lose that mental focus, that's the other component to how muscles break down and don't get the influence. If our brain's not sending a signal to the muscle to continue to be active and continue to provide a good contraction and concentration, that's the other component. The brain controls the muscles activating. So we got to keep that brain sharp as well. So we can't train hard on all ends, in the weightlifting room, on the bike, and on the motorcycle. It has to be selective.
Yeah, because I mean, we haven't really touched on that, but that's a big reason why muscles can burn out, not just fatigue, but central nervous system fatigue, right? Like we no longer send those proper signals to do what we want them to do, and next thing you know, we're
we might be getting lazy or lethargic in our thoughts during training, and then we have to continue to have cues to make training be very specific and demanding, and you can suffer an injury if your focus leaves you, especially on the motorcycle in particular.
So brain fatigue, like CNS fatigue, what are some ways like you can train to help with that?
Typically training for your sport. So obviously the highest risk to have an injury, let's just say for our motorcycles racers that we train, is on the track. So we've got to make sure they're very focused and they're able to put in their training and focused on the motorcycle. And that's probably the biggest. And then on the side of that, we're going to train them in the gym in a different way, but our risk reward there isn't as severe because if they lose focus in the gym a bit, there's not catastrophic results.
Yeah, they fall off a stationary bike.
Yep. So we tend to really sharpen the focus on the motorcycle, and that's where the riding coach comes in and watching those numbers and watching their heart rate and making sure they're pushing themselves but not too far and consistent. That's probably the biggest trick, and that's what the master pools are really good at. Their facility is they train very consistently and they train very specifically to their goal. And as we mentioned earlier, if you want to be good at one thing, you've got to train specifically at that one thing to get to your goal. And that's what they do really, really well there.
So what from a nutrition standpoint can you do? So from the training thing, you got to be super targeted on what you're doing and look at risk versus reward. Like you don't want to, overtrain on the motocross bike because the risk is extremely high. But say from like a nutrition standpoint, an eating, drinking, whatever, is there some stuff you can do from a food standpoint to help with brain fatigue? Because that's something that most people don't talk about, right? they feel the muscle soreness, but not necessarily do they feel the brain fog or the, you know, the CNS, the central nervous system brain fatigue, right?
Yeah, a lot of those are hydration, sodium, potassium, you know, your minerals there, making sure you have your enough sodium, potassium to go through the exercise day. You don't want to become dehydrated. So that's a big one. In terms of chemicals, there are a lot of things coming out right now that are trying to kind of more positively affect the central nervous system. And that's a little bit more of, I would say, a newer phenomenon for some of our supplements coming out and trying to train for focus.
Right.
Research is definitely coming out, and so as that continues to share itself and we get to see more stuff, we'll probably start utilizing more of those supplements for focus, because I think that's a huge component.
Right. So now, like as of right now, you're talking a lot of electrolytes. Like a big part of it is dehydration that equals, you know, some of that fatigue.
Yeah, and oxygen in as well.
Okay.
So if
Back
your
to the nitric
body,
oxide,
yep,
can we increase blood flow?
yep,
You know, can we increase our oxygen intake? You know, some sort of vasodilator that's going to help loosen up the arteries and
exactly.
blood flow. Okay. And the research
And
is
temperature plays a role.
temperature. What you like body temperature?
Body temperature plays a big role. Yeah. We know that if you're an untrained person in temperature, that body will decrease in central nervous system input, and it's going to fatigue sooner than if it was a trained person in
Wow.
the heat. So that's
Okay.
where heat training comes in. But also the temperature plays a role in motivation and focus.
Gotcha. So motocrossers really have to watch out for that, because I mean, we may be in California training and then the race is in Florida, and the temperature is a big difference between humidity and, you know, just average
Humidity and temperature.
Yeah.
Yeah. So staying cool off the bike and on the bike, warming up still, but oftentimes you can warm up with an ice pack still on your neck to keep your overall body temperature cool, but allow your muscles to warm up, and then still go out and race and then come back and stay cool. And we know temperature, once again, plays a big role in performance and the input of the central nervous system. So
Got it.
tactics to stay cool would be excellent.
Perfect. I'm excited to see the research. You know, that's one thing that we've been working on a lot, because at Cell Sauce, like the research is so new. You know, like you read about it, like all this stuff about brain fatigue and CNS fatigue, and you're like, how can we? But you know, like the nutrients are there, they just don't have the studies done on it. I mean, we've been working on a formula to help with that, and we think it may help, but the science doesn't back it yet. You know, not quite there.
Yeah.
So it's a work in progress, but cool to see.